There are places I can't walk through anymore, not because they're haunted by something dark, but because they still carry the echo of you. A park bench, an old cafe window, a corner of the bookstore where your laughter once spilled into the air like sunlight breaking through a storm. I find myself pausing in front of those places, pretending I'm just tired or distracted or thinking about something else. But I'm not. I'm always thinking about you. You left without a reason, and that is the part that stays, like a song that never finishes, a sentence hanging in the air without punctuation. I replay the last time I saw you more often than I care to admit, not because anything extraordinary happened that day, but because nothing did. There was no warning, no closure, just a silence that settled like dust on all the things we never got to say. I still remember how your absence felt louder than your presence ever was. Isn't that strange? How something missing can take up more space than something that's there? You were the kind of person I never expected, and maybe that was my first mistake. You arrived like a warm current in a cold room, unexpected but unmistakable. And I let myself believe in the quiet pull of something that didn't make sense but felt right anyway. I didn't ask too many questions. I didn't press. Maybe because I thought if I held it too tightly, it would disappear. But it disappeared anyway. I don't think you ever realized how much space you took up in me, how easily your name slipped into the rhythm of my breath, how every ordinary day became a little less ordinary because you were in it. And now, every day feels slightly off, like a familiar song played in the wrong key. Sometimes I wonder if you ever think about me, if you ever turn down a street and feel something nudge at your chest and think, this used to be hers. Or maybe you've let it all go. Maybe I was just a moment for you, a soft chapter between louder ones. But you were the whole book to me. I still remember the way your voice changed when you were tired, the way your eyes lingered on small, unnoticed things, like the flutter of a bird's wing or the way leaves skated across the pavement in fall. You taught me how to pay attention without ever saying a word. You just lived that way, gently, curiously, like everything had meaning, even the quiet. I miss that the most, I think. The way the world felt when you were in it. Now, the world feels flatter, dimmer, like someone turned down the color just enough that I notice, but not enough that I can explain it to anyone else. And maybe that's what grief really is. Not loud, not dramatic, just the slow fading of light you didn't realize you were basking in until it was gone. I try not to talk about you. People don't understand how someone who's no longer here can still shape your every thought. They expect time to be some kind of eraser. But time doesn't erase, it just moves forward. And some of us get left behind, walking through memories like they're cities we once lived in but can't go back to. I still visit those cities. Every night before I fall asleep, I walk their empty streets. I sit at the cafes we never went to but talked about. I run my fingers across books you never read but would have loved. I live the life we didn't have time to build. In dreams, we're still possible. I don't even know if I'm mad at you. Isn't that ridiculous? I want to be. I want to feel the fire, the anger, the betrayal. But all I feel is the ache, the quiet kind, the kind that hums beneath the surface and only grows louder when the rest of the world falls silent. You left without a reason, but you left with everything. You took the laughter that used to fill my afternoons. You took the ease that used to live in my chest. You took the version of me that only existed in your presence, the one who believed love didn't always end in confusion. Sometimes, late at night, I still write letters to you, not to send, just to empty myself of the weight. I write about my day, as if you still care, as if your eyes might find their way back to my words. as if anything could make this make sense. I want to ask you why, not in a desperate way, not anymore, just softly, the way a child asks about stars, not expecting answers, just needing to speak the question aloud. Why did you go? Why didn't you say goodbye? Was it something I said? Something I missed? Were you hurting in a way I couldn't see? Or did I simply love you more than you ever planned to be loved? That thought lingers more than I wanted to. The possibility that I scared you with the depth of my feeling, that I opened a door in myself you never intended to step through. That maybe, just maybe, I was too much for someone who only ever meant to stay a while. And yet, if I had known, I still would have chosen you. I would have said yes to every fleeting moment, even if I knew how it would end. Because even now, with all the ache and the longing and the unspoken goodbyes, I don't regret the love. I regret the silence. I regret not asking you to stay. I regret not knowing I needed to. You were not just a moment. You were an entire season. And even now, I find myself dressing for your weather, carrying an umbrella of caution, wearing layers of protection, in case the storm comes again, in case someone new arrives only to vanish without reason. I hope wherever you are, the air feels kind. I hope someone notices the way your eyes pause at beauty. I hope someone understands that your silence doesn't mean absence. It just means you're still searching. And maybe, just maybe, you'll find your way back to something that feels like home. Or maybe you already have. But as for me, I'm still here, still walking through the shadows of your leaving, still placing your memory gently on the pillow beside me like a name I'm afraid to say out loud. Still wondering, always wondering. There's this one day I keep coming back to. Not an anniversary, not a birthday, not even the day you left. Just a Tuesday, I think. The kind of day no one would remember unless something inside them insisted they should. And mine does, every time. The sky was soft that day, like it couldn't quite decide whether to be blue or gray. The kind of sky that wraps around you like a sweater left out in early autumn, still warm, but with a whisper of chill beneath it. You walked beside me, quiet, not the awkward kind of quiet, but the comfortable kind, the kind that only exists when two people have stopped needing to fill silence with sound. You had one hand in your pocket and the other brushing lightly against mine, not holding it, just there, almost, like you wanted to but didn't know if I'd be okay with that. The memory of that almost touch still lingers more than most kisses ever did. It's strange how the things that never fully happened take up more room than the things that did. We didn't talk about anything important. I remember you pointing out a dog on the other side of the street, laughing at how it trotted with too much confidence for its tiny legs. You made up a name for it. I can't remember the name now, but I remember the sound of your laugh, the kind that started in your chest and tumbled out like a secret. It made everything else on the street go quiet for a moment. I looked at you, and I knew. I didn't say it then, but I knew. I knew I could fall for you, that maybe I already had, that there was something in you that felt like a doorway I had waited my whole life to walk through. That afternoon, we wandered aimlessly, and it felt like purpose. We ended up sitting on a curb outside a flower shop, and you asked if I believed people could ever truly know each other. I said yes too quickly. You smiled like you didn't agree, but didn't want to argue. You always smiled like that when you were thinking something you wouldn't say. I used to think I understood the quiet between your words, but now I wonder if I ever really did. You bought me a flower that day, just one, a small one with petals that looked like they were blushing. I remember you said it reminded you of me. I still don't know what that meant. Was it the softness, the way it leaned toward the light, or was it the way it looked like it might fall apart if you held it too long? I pressed that flower between the pages of a book I never finished. I don't know why I picked that book. Maybe because I knew I wouldn't get to the end. Maybe because I was already afraid some stories don't end the way we hope. I opened that book the other night, and the flower was still there, faded, brittle, but whole, like it had held on through all the seasons I thought had taken it. I ran my finger over its edges and felt something break inside me. Not loudly, just a soft unraveling. That's what that day feels like, a pressed flower in the pages of a life that kept moving, but not always forward. I wonder if you remember it. I wonder if that walk, that laughter, that single flower meant anything to you at all, or if it was just another Tuesday in a string of forgettable days. I hate that I'll never know, that the story I keep replaying might not even exist in your memory. Sometimes I think you must have had your reasons, that maybe you carried hurts too deep for me to reach, that maybe leaving was the only way you knew how to keep from breaking me too, and yet a part of me still aches for the version of you who stayed, the version who reached out and said, I don't have all the answers, but I want to try. I never asked you to be perfect. I never needed you to have it all figured out. I would have sat with your questions. I would have held your doubts like something precious because they were part of you. But you never gave me the chance. You just walked away, quietly, without a scene, without a reason. And I've been standing in the silence ever since. Do you know what it feels like to be the one left with the questions? To replay every moment like a puzzle missing the final piece? Trying to find the line, the word, the shift that made it all fall apart? That day we walked through the city, I keep looking for cracks, but there were none. Not then. Not in your voice, not in your eyes, not in the way you leaned in when I said something silly and you pretended it was profound. That's what makes it so hard. Because if there had been something, anything I could name, then maybe I could let it go. Maybe I could file it away under heartbreak and move on. But what do you do with a love that disappears without warning? Where do you put all the moments that felt real when there's no one left to hand them back to? I keep them here, in my chest, in the corners of my days, in the songs I skip and the roads I avoid and the photos I can't bring myself to delete. You're everywhere and nowhere, still. And I don't know if that's beautiful or cruel. Maybe both. I walked past that flower shop again last week, the one where you bought me that blushing little thing. It's still there, still with the same chalkboard sign out front, still with the same cat sleeping in the window. I stood outside for a moment, wondering if I'd see you, as if time might fold in on itself and bring you back to that exact spot, holding that flower, smiling that almost smile. But it didn't. Of course it didn't. The door stayed closed, the cat didn't move, the sky was gray again, and I walked away, carrying something you probably don't even remember giving me. I wish I could say that day was special because of something extraordinary, but it wasn't. It was the ordinariness that made it unforgettable. The way you turned the simplest things into moments I still can't let go of. The way you made Tuesday feel like forever. I don't know if I'll ever stop looking for that feeling again. I don't know if I want to. But I do know this. No matter how many years pass, no matter how many memories get folded into the pages of my life, that day will stay with me, pressed like a flower, whole, faded, still beautiful, still yours. The days after you left didn't come all at once. They didn't hit me like a wave the way I'd imagined loss might feel. No, it was more like mist, quiet, creeping, clinging to everything until I couldn't tell where you ended and I began. I didn't believe it at first, not really. I told myself maybe you were just quiet, maybe something had come up, maybe this wasn't an ending, just a pause, just a breath being held. So I waited, and in that waiting, I did strange things. I kept your messages, I reread them like scripture. Not the words themselves, but the spaces between them. I searched for signs, for clues, for anything that would whisper, I didn't mean to go. I convinced myself your silence was temporary, that one day your name would light up my phone again and everything that had gone quiet would burst back into song. I didn't delete your photos. I couldn't. Every time I tried, my hand hesitated. Like erasing your image meant erasing the reality of you. I wasn't ready for that. I'm still not. I wore the shirt you once said you liked, not because I liked it, but because maybe, just maybe, wearing it would bring back a piece of how things used to be. Like fabric could hold memory, like cotton could carry hope. I walked the same streets we used to walk. I sat in the same cafes. I ordered your favorite drink, even though I never really liked it. I let the bitterness stay on my tongue because in some strange way, it felt like you, lingering, uninvited, familiar. I made room for you in places you no longer showed up. And the truth is, I didn't know how to stop. People told me to move on, not with cruelty, but with kindness that didn't understand. They said I should take a trip, get fresh air, meet someone new, as if healing was something linear, as if forgetting was as simple as distraction. But how do you forget someone who wasn't just part of your life, but part of the way you saw the world? You were the color in the corners of my vision, the warmth behind the way I said, I'm okay. The invisible thread connecting my quiet thoughts to something that felt like meaning. You weren't just someone I loved. You were the silence I had learned to sit with, the breath between sentences, the ache I didn't want to heal. So I held on, not loudly, not desperately, but softly, like a candle I was afraid to let go out, even if the flame had stopped giving heat. I spoke to you in my mind, not every day, but often enough that it became a kind of ritual. I told you how work was going, what the weather was like, how I saw someone on the train who reminded me of you. Their laugh was too high, their eyes the wrong color, but something in the way they held their phone reminded me of the way you always held yours with both hands, like you were afraid to drop whatever piece of the world you were holding in that moment. And at night, I dreamed of you, not always as you were, but as I remembered you, as I needed you. Sometimes you were smiling, sometimes distant, sometimes you said nothing at all. Those were the hardest dreams, the ones where your silence followed me into sleep. I started writing letters, dozens of them, none of them sent, just folded pages hidden in drawers, in coat pockets, between pages of books. Words I couldn't say out loud because I didn't know if you would want to hear them. But they helped, for a little while, until the ink began to look like desperation. I think, in some way, I believed that if I loved you hard enough, even in your absence, you might feel it. That somewhere, some parts you would stir and remember me. That you'd wake up one morning with my name in your chest and think, maybe I should go back. But you didn't. And yet, I couldn't let go. Letting go felt like betrayal, like giving up on something sacred. I kept your memory alive in the softest, most hidden places. In the way I folded laundry, thinking about how you used to hate folding socks. In the way I stopped buying the cereal you never liked. In the way I turned my head when someone new looked at me a little too long. I stayed loyal to the ghost of you. Not because I couldn't move forward, but because I didn't want to move away from where you once stood. I wonder sometimes if you felt the same pull, if you woke up in the middle of the night with my name lingering like the last note of a forgotten song. If you ever turned a corner and thought you saw me, only to blink and find a stranger in my place. If you ever whispered my name to no one just to remember how it sounded in your mouth. But maybe not. Maybe I've been the only one carrying the weight of this silence, the only one keeping the candle lit, the only one believing that something that vanished could still have meaning. I know it's not healthy. I know you're not coming back. But knowing and feeling are two different things. And feelings don't follow logic. They follow memory. They follow the echo of footsteps down a hallway you still walk in your dreams. Some nights I wake up expecting you. I don't mean in a hopeful way. just in that strange half-sleep state where the past and present blur, and I think maybe, just maybe, I'll turn over and find your shoulder there. That warmth, that weight, that breath against my hair. But the bed is always empty, and that emptiness isn't just space, it's memory, it's habit, it's a goodbye that was never said. So I fill it the only way I know how, with words, with the sound of my own voice whispering your name into the dark, with wondering, still wondering. It didn't happen in a storm, not with shouting or shattered glass, not in a dramatic moment where I threw your things into a box or stood under the rain asking why. I wish it had been like that. At least then I could have pointed to something loud, something final, and said, that's when I knew. But the truth is, it happened on a Tuesday morning, quiet, unassuming. I was standing in the kitchen, holding a cup of tea I didn't really want. The sun was coming through the window in soft strips, dust dancing in it like little ghosts. And I realized I hadn't checked my phone in hours. Not because I was distracted, not because I was busy, but because I didn't expect you to call anymore. That realization didn't come like a jolt. It arrived like a sigh, like something in me had stopped holding its breath. And in that silence, I knew you weren't coming back. It was the first time I let the thought sit with me without pushing it away, without whispering maybe or what if to soften the edges. I just let it be. Let it echo in the hollow space where hope used to sleep. I remember I sat down at the kitchen table and just stared at the steam curling from the cup. There were no tears, no breakdown, just a quiet ache that settled in my chest like something too familiar to fight anymore. And I think that was grief too. Not the kind people write poems about, not the kind that makes you curl up and scream, but the kind that whispers, it's time. The kind that walks beside you with gentle hands and tells you the waiting is over. I looked around the room and you were nowhere. Not in the chair across from me, not in the half-empty mug I used to save for you, not even in the air anymore, just gone. And I felt ridiculous for how long I had clung to the idea of your return. As if love were some boomerang, and if I just stood still long enough, you'd come flying back into my arms. But people aren't objects. They don't come back because you stand in place. They don't return because your heart is open. Sometimes they just leave, and that's the end of the story, but not the end of the memory. I think that's what makes it hard. The world doesn't stop when someone exits your life. The clocks keep ticking, the sky keeps shifting, the mail still arrives, and the laundry still piles up. But inside you, something stays paused. A part of you still standing at the train station, waiting for the one who isn't on any incoming train. I spent so long in that station, imagining the moment you'd return, the apology, the explanation, the tearful embrace. It was all there, clear as a scene from a film I'd memorized. But that day, sitting in the kitchen with my untouched tea, I stopped playing with scene. I let the reel run out, and the screen stayed blank. You weren't coming back. Not because I wasn't enough, not because you didn't feel something once, but because people leave, sometimes without the decency of a reason, without the courage to say goodbye. And that too is a kind of answer. I walked around the apartment that day, and everything felt slightly different. Not broken, just quieter. Like the echo had finally faded, and now the walls were mine again. Mine to fill, mine to sit with. I stood in front of the mirror, and for the first time, I didn't see someone waiting. I saw someone learning how to exist without you. It didn't feel strong, it didn't feel brave, but it felt real, and real was enough. I didn't delete your number that day. I still haven't. I didn't pack away the memories. I didn't throw out the mug. I just stopped holding the door open, stopped looking down the hallway every time the elevator chimed, stopped imagining your key in the lock. That night, the bed still felt too big, but I didn't lay on your side like I usually did. I stayed on mine. I faced the window. I let the city lights press soft shadows into the room, and I whispered your name once. Not to call you back, not to conjure some ghost, just to say it one last time, soft and small and holy. And I slept. Not well, not deeply, but without waking to check the phone, without scanning my dreams for your face. It was the beginning of something, not healing. Not yet, but honesty. And in that honesty, I found a different kind of ache. Not the ache of hope, but the ache of release. You weren't coming back, and I would have to find a way to live with that, to walk through this city with the knowledge that your footsteps were no longer behind me, to drink my tea without expecting a second cup to be needed, to speak without waiting for your voice to answer back. It hurts. It still hurts. But there's a stillness now, a quiet I'm learning not to be afraid of. I think part of me will always carry your absence like a second heartbeat, there, beneath the surface, pulsing quietly when the world slows down. But that day, in the kitchen, I finally realized something important. You left, and I stayed. And maybe, just maybe, that means this story isn't about your return. Maybe it's about my becoming. But not today, not yet. Today, I still wonder, and I still remember the sound of your name in a room that no longer holds you. Some nights are quieter than others, not because the world is quieter, but because something in me goes still, like a lake at midnight, untouched by wind, holding every reflection too clearly. Those are the nights when I feel you most, when the day has nothing left to offer and the darkness settles in like a familiar coat. You still come back to me then, not in the way I used to hope, not as a knock on the door or a message on my phone, but in smaller ways, softer ways. A phrase I once heard you say slipping into my thoughts, a flicker of memory, your hand brushing hair from your face. A song on the radio that plays like it knows something it shouldn't. It's strange how memory chooses its moments. It doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't wait until you're ready. It just walks in, unannounced, barefoot, dripping with the past. And I let it, because sometimes I miss the ache. I miss the way your absence gave me something to hold, something to talk to when no one else understood. It sounds ridiculous, I know, but grief can be comforting when it's all you have left of someone. And I think, in some twisted way, I became afraid of what would happen if even the pain let go. Because then, what would be left? A void? An empty room with no echo? So on those nights, I let you back in. I turn off the lights, I crawl into bed, I pull the blanket to my chin like a child afraid of monsters. Only the monster is the silence, and the only thing that soothes it is you. Not really you, but the version I carry, the one I built from scraps of memory and unfinished sentences, the one who still looks at me the way you once did under that dim cafe light, like I was something you wanted to keep, even if you didn't know how. I know it's not healthy. I know this version of you isn't real, but he's all I have. And sometimes, when the house is too quiet and the world feels too far away, even a ghost is better than the dark. I lie there, eyes open, and I listen for your breath. Not because I expect it, but because once upon a time, it was the sound that meant I wasn't alone. I used to count the rhythm of your breathing as I drifted to sleep. In, out, like waves I trusted to carry me. Now there's only the sound of the fan spinning, the occasional creak of wood, my own breath, which never sounds quite right. Sometimes I dream of you, not every night, but when it happens, it's never obvious at first. You're just there, in the background of the dream, buying apples at a market, sitting on a bench feeding birds, turning around at the sound of my voice. And for a moment, everything feels normal, familiar. But I always wake up before you say anything, as if even my subconscious knows better than to imagine closure. And when I wake, it's like surfacing from a warm lake into cold air. Your face still lingers behind my eyes. Your scent, though I haven't smelled it in so long, still hovers faintly in the folds of my pillow. I used to reach for my phone after those dreams, thinking maybe they meant something, that you might have thought of me too, that maybe, across some invisible thread, we had touched again. But now, I just lie there, eyes open, staring at the ceiling, letting the memory dissolve like sugar in warm water. I don't cry like I used to, not because it doesn't hurt anymore, but because I've learned how to carry the weight. Like people who live with chronic pain, you stop flinching, you just adjust your posture. I think that's what these nights are, posture adjustments, learning how to rest with a piece of myself missing, letting the bed be too big without trying to fill it, letting the silence be what it is. And when the memories come, I don't fight them, I let them play. Like an old vinyl record, scratches and all. I let the needle drop, I let the music drift into the dark. Sometimes it's a good memory, a night we laughed so hard we forgot what started it. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's the moment I knew you were already pulling away but didn't want to admit it. Both kinds hurt. Both kinds matter because they mean you were real. You mattered, even if only for a season, even if you left without a reason. I think part of me is still trying to understand how someone can disappear so completely and yet remain so present. You're nowhere, but you're also everywhere. In the way I hesitate before opening up to someone new, in the way I flinch when a goodbye feels too sudden, in the way I still check the sidewalk for faces that look like yours, even though I know they never will be. Maybe I'm not trying to bring you back anymore. Maybe I'm just trying to make peace with the space you left behind. But peace is slow. It doesn't arrive like a sunrise. It comes like winter thawing, inch by inch. And some nights, it's still frozen. Some nights, I still whisper your name into the dark, not to call you home, just to hear it again, soft, tender, like the echo of something once loved. There's a strange moment that happens when the noise begins to fade. Not the outer noise, cars passing, voices outside, the hum of lights, but the noise inside, the constant loop of memory, of questions, of longing. It doesn't vanish all at once. It just slows, like a record player winding down, like rain turning to mist. And then something else takes its place, silence, but not the kind that hurts. This one felt different. It didn't press against my ribs or fill my ears with echo. It just sat with me. And for the first time, instead of asking where you were, it asked me where I had gone. I didn't know how to answer that, because for so long, I had been orbiting around you, even after you left. My world was still built on the shape of your absence. I measured my days by the distance from your memory. I told my stories in the past tense, as if I couldn't exist without your name somewhere in the sentence. But the silence didn't care about you. It only cared about me. It asked me when I last did something just because it made me feel alive. Not to escape the missing, not to prove I was okay, not to forget, but because it brought me joy. I couldn't remember. I sat on the floor, legs crossed, hands in my lap, and tried to summon one simple memory of doing something just for me. And I came up empty. I had been surviving, getting through, keeping busy enough to avoid the ache, but never still enough to hear what I needed. So I stayed there, in that silence. I didn't run, I didn't reach for my phone, I didn't fill the space with your memory. I just let the question linger. Who am I without you? It wasn't a bitter question, it wasn't sad. It felt necessary, like a door finally creaking open in a room I'd been afraid to enter. And behind that door, there were pieces of me I hadn't seen in a long time. I found an old notebook, one I used to keep before I met you, before everything was about us. Inside were scribbled poems, unfinished thoughts, little sketches of nothing in particular. And I realized I had once had a life that wasn't shaped around someone else. I had once been whole. Maybe not perfectly, maybe not fully, but I had existed with dreams that belonged to no one but me. Where did she go? I think I handed her over, piece by piece, without even realizing it. That's what we do when we love deeply. We offer, we bend, we give. And if we're not careful, we forget what we looked like before them. You didn't take me away from myself. I did. Out of hope, out of devotion, out of the belief that love meant choosing someone else, even at the cost of myself. But now you're gone, and I'm still here. So I have to ask, if the story no longer includes you, what do I want it to become? That question terrified me, because the truth is, I had no idea. I had built so much of my identity around loving you, around missing you, around wondering what went wrong. It had become a full-time role, keeper of the memory, guardian of the ache. And now, standing at the edge of a quieter season, I didn't know how to be anything else. But that night, something changed. Not in a loud, cinematic way, just in the way my hands moved. I lit a candle, not for you, for me. I turned on music, not our song, but one I hadn't heard in years, one that made me sway without thinking. I made tea and didn't leave a second cup on the counter. I opened a book and read without waiting for the urge to reread your old messages. It wasn't healing, it was noticing. Noticing that I could move in a room and not look for you in the corners. That I could speak aloud and not expect your silence to answer. That I could sit in my own skin and not feel like a ghost waiting to be seen again. You were still there, still in the background, still in the places I couldn't touch without remembering. But you weren't the center anymore, and for the first time, neither was the pain. There was space. Empty, yes, but not hollow, like soil that had been cleared, waiting for something new to grow. Not because I was ready, but because maybe, just maybe, I was willing to plant something small, to begin again slowly, not to replace you, not to forget, but to remember me, the girl who used to laugh for no reason, who used to dance in the kitchen, who used to believe that the best parts of life were still ahead. I missed her more than I missed you, and maybe that was the most honest thing I'd felt in a long time. So I wrote this down, not as a goodbye, but as a beginning, a moment to mark the shift, where the story starts to turn, not away from love, but towards something quieter, something steadier, toward the self I left waiting by the window while I watched for your return. I don't know what happens next, but tonight I am here, not waiting, not wondering, just breathing, for me. It happened on a Sunday afternoon, the kind of day that doesn't ask anything of you. Sky wide and soft, breeze gentle, no appointments, no demands. I was walking through a quiet part of the city I hadn't visited in months, maybe years. No reason, really, just wandering. And that's when I saw him, or I thought I did. He had your shoulders, the same slope, the same way of moving, like the world was a story you'd already read but still found beautiful. He walked like you, calm, steady, like the sidewalk was an old friend. His hair was almost the same, longer than I remembered, but messy in that same deliberate way, like it had been tussled by wind or memory. My breath caught, but not in panic, not in hope either. Just pause. I stopped walking, just for a second. He turned his head, and from the side, for a moment that barely lasted longer than a heartbeat, I could have sworn it was you. That same curve in the cheek, that same quiet in the eyes. My body didn't move, not forward, not away. I just stood there, watching someone who wasn't you, but could have been. If time had folded, if fate had paused, if the world had turned differently. And then he stepped closer to someone waiting for him at a table, a woman. She stood when he arrived, smiled like she knew him, touched his arm in that soft, familiar way you only touch someone you've let in. He smiled back, said something I couldn't hear, and just like that, you vanished. He wasn't you, not even close once I looked again, but for a single, silent moment, you lived again in the shape of a stranger. And I didn't chase, I didn't cry, I didn't look away. I just watched. There was something tender in that stillness. Not the longing I used to carry, not the ache of what if, just a quiet witnessing of what never became, a breath between pages. I started walking again, slowly. And as I moved, I realized something had changed. Not in him, not in the illusion, but in me. Because once upon a time, I would have followed. I would have run through a crowd just to see if it was really you. I would have called your name without thinking. I would have let hope blaze through me like a wildfire, even if it scorched every part of me again. But not this time. This time, I knew better. Not because I stopped caring, not because you stopped mattering, but because something inside me had softened, had grown, had finally accepted that closure doesn't always come in the form of a reunion. Sometimes it comes in the ability to stay still, to witness a memory without unraveling, to love someone quietly from far away with no need for them to turn back. As I walked, I passed a bakery we once talked about visiting. We never did. It always stayed a maybe. That was so much of us, wasn't it? 1,000 maybes, a list of intentions never quite lived. I smiled, just barely, and kept moving. There was no weight to the moment, just a breeze brushing against my shoulders, just sunlight pressing through the spaces between leaves, just a feeling of being alive, without you, and okay. That night, I sat by the window with a cup of tea. No second cup waiting, no empty seat beside me aching for your return. Just me, the candle flickering, a book resting in my lap I hadn't opened. I thought about how strange it is, this heart of mine that once shattered in your absence, now beating softly, quietly, even when you reappeared in the form of someone else. I let that image rest on the windowsill of my thoughts. You, alive in a stranger, smiling at someone else, living a life I'll never know. And I didn't feel replaced. I didn't feel forgotten. I just felt free. Not in the loud way freedom is often spoken about, but in the kind of freedom that feels like warm light on skin after a long winter. Gentle, earned. I wondered for a moment if you'd ever felt the same. If you ever saw someone and thought it might be me. If, just for a second, something in your chest whispered my name again. I don't know, maybe you did, maybe you didn't. But either way, it doesn't change what's real now. And what's real is this. I am no longer waiting for you to walk back into my story. Not out of bitterness, not out of anger, but because the chapter has already ended. The pen has already lifted, and the only way forward is through the unwritten. I still carry you, of course. Some part of me always will, but no longer as the fire that consumes. Now you are a photograph, gently tucked inside a drawer I rarely open. A song I no longer skip, but don't seek out either. A face that rises sometimes in dreams, but fades gently with the morning. There's grace in that. There's healing in being able to remember without drowning. There's peace in knowing that the love I gave was real, even if it wasn't returned in the way I hoped, even if it was left without explanation, even if it found its end not with a goodbye, but with a quiet vanishing. And so, that man I saw, who was not you, he reminded me of something I hadn't known how to say until now. That love can still live in us long after it has gone silent. That we can still feel deeply, even if the story didn't unfold the way we thought it would. And that sometimes the most beautiful part of healing is not in forgetting, but in seeing clearly and choosing not to chase. So thank you, wherever you are, for teaching me what it is to love with everything, and for leaving so I could finally learn how to love without losing myself. Dear me, I've spent so long writing to you. No, not to you, to them, to the shadow that left, to the silence that lingered, to the version of love I held like it might bloom again if I only kept the soil warm enough. I've written pages soaked in memory, words carved from grief. I've whispered names into pillows, hoping the air would carry them somewhere worth hearing. But tonight, I turn the page differently. Tonight, the letter is not for them. It's for you, the one who stayed, the one who woke up every morning with the ache still curled under your ribs but chose to rise anyway. The one who walked through rooms that echoed with ghosts and still reached for the light switch. The one who sat in silence and learned to make peace with the echo. You stayed, even when the love was gone, even when the questions had no answers, even when the nights felt like long hallways with no door at the end. You stayed inside your skin, even when it felt like a cage. And that matters. It matters more than any return, more than any apology that never came, more than the story you once hoped would be written differently. You are not the broken thing they left behind. You are what remained when the storm passed. You are the stillness after, the breath after the sob, the quiet resilience that never needed to shout to survive. I know there were moments when you didn't feel strong, when the world kept moving and your feet wouldn't, when every step felt like betrayal, like walking away from something sacred. I know you lit candles you didn't believe in, hoping the flicker would feel like hope. I know you cried into the space beside you and hated how easily the silence made room. I know, but I also know this. You didn't let their leaving define you forever. You didn't let the unanswered why become the only sentence you lived in. You didn't let the pain become your name. You held it, you carried it, you loved through it. And slowly, quietly, you began to set it down. Not because it stopped hurting, but because you started remembering yourself. The you that existed before the leaving, before the forgetting, before the silence became familiar. I see her now, not as someone fully healed, but as someone honest. Someone who knows what it means to love with her whole chest, even if it goes unanswered. Someone who has learned that longing doesn't always mean losing, and that sometimes the bravest thing is to keep loving, gently, quietly, inward. You don't need to erase the story to move forward. You don't need to hate them to let go. You don't need to pretend it didn't matter, because it did. It mattered in the way spring matters after a long winter. It mattered in the way a song matters, even after the record stops playing. It mattered because you loved, fully, deeply, without condition. And that is not weakness, that is legacy. You are not what was left behind, you are what continued. What kept beating? What kept blooming? You are the hands that wrote every letter, the breath that spoke every I miss you into the dark, the body that carried memory like a prayer and still chose to keep walking. So here's what I want you to remember. You don't have to hold the ache forever. You can set it down when you're ready, not because the love wasn't real, but because you were, and you still are. You can visit the memory, but you don't have to live there. You can miss the laughter, the almosts, the could-have-beens, and still choose a life beyond them. You can let go, not of the past, but of the weight it's been asking you to carry. You deserve more than a life lived in rewind. You deserve mornings that don't begin with longing. You deserve days where your name is the only one that matters. You deserve to be the main character in your own story again, not the one waiting at the window, not the one writing endless letters to someone who never writes back, but the one who writes to herself, with love, with softness, with awe. Because look at what you survived. Look at how you kept showing up. Look at the way your heart still opens, even with the scars. That is not a wound. That is strength wearing the face of tenderness. So tonight, close your eyes not in sorrow, but in gratitude. Not because it all makes sense now, not because the questions were answered, but because you made it here, to this moment, to this breath, to this space where the ache is no longer a cage, but a reminder that you once loved without holding back, and that you can still love again. Maybe not today, maybe not soon, but someday. From a place not of emptiness, but of wholeness. You are not waiting anymore. You are living, and I am so proud of you, always, with all the love you've ever given away and never thought to keep for yourself. Me.